I jump ship because of any of Ted's preferences, I think Billy Sheehan probably would have stayed with the band if Ted Templeman was still producing it, because I think Billy liked the direction that Dave was going with Ted Templeman.
Yeah.
It was a straight-ahead rock album.
Yeah.
And when Dave fired Ted and he was moving away from that, that was it for Billy. He was done. And
Absolutely.
I think Steve was done with that too. And I think Steve just wanted to do his own thing. He'd done what he had done with Roth. He's like, okay, there's not much more I can do here. I'm moving on. I'm going to Whitesnake, and I'm moving on to a solo career too.
I always thought the Whitesnake move was a strange one for Steve. I never thought that really fit him.
That was there for Steve to help pay the bills, because Steve has never been averse to joining bands. I mean, he was in Roth's band. He was in
Alcatraz.
Alcatraz, but
Zappa's band.
He also played, what's that?
Zappa's band.
Right, no, but what's his name's band after the lead singer quit the Sex Pistols?
Oh, PIL.
PIL.
Public Image Limited, yeah.
Right. So I think Steve is just like, you know what? I'm going to still do the band thing, pay some bills. He could do that, and then he'll go off and do his solo thing, which will satisfy him creatively. He's another guy who's always working and always doing things, so That doesn't surprise me at all.
Letter number 4 comes from Dan Ninen. He says, you mentioned Father Time by Sammy Hagar, and the lyric, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And I'm surprised you didn't catch it, but Dave wrote that on Trouble with Never, on A Different Kind of Truth. Also, fuck the Four Horsemen for ripping you off. If you purchased that on a credit card, you should dispute the charge. They were recording in my buddy's studio back in L.A., and they came to my birthday party held at my friend's house in the Hollywood Hills. One of them was giving people grief for leaning on his car. He said, I don't like people leaning on my machines. Pompous asshole, Dan Ninen. So, hey, Dan, thanks, man. We did point out multiple times that Sammy is so proud of that lyric, but that he had no idea that Dave used it. I think we didn't remember the song he used it in, but we knew it was on A Different Kind of Truth. It is The Trouble with Never, that's for sure. I think we had just forgot the specific name of the song, but we got the album right. Yeah, the Four Horsemen, I'm determined to get that box set, so we'll have to see. I might have to go to the guy's doorstep in order to get it. What do you think, Dave?
No, I'm sure that will go over really well. Yeah. Nice knowing you. Nice knowing you. Yeah, I think we forgot the specific name.
Yeah.
I forget. I just couldn't remember the song. But once we heard the line, we knew. We knew.
Oh, yeah, no.
I can't wait for that album to come out, and I can't wait for Sam to keep bragging about that line, and I just can't wait for, more press about Sam. You're not the first person to do that line. I don't even think David Lee Roth is the first person to do that line either.
I think you're right. But the funny thing is that I would love a camera shot of Sammy's face when he finds out that that's a David Lee Roth line. So now what would be fantastic is one of those memes where it says, when you're the second lead singer of Van Halen and you find out the lyric that you're most proud of is written by the first lead singer of Van Halen.
Oh, yeah. Well, doesn't Sam know that already? I mean, somebody must have told him by now.
Listen, I have never seen him talk so proudly about a lyric that he wrote in my life. It's almost like he felt like he sculpted this incredible saying. I mean, like you said, I don't even think that's original for Dave. I just think it's sort of an expression that he utilized for his song, which is fine. No one's saying Dave owns that line, but I just think it's funny that not only is it a Dave lyric, but it's on the last Van Halen album. It's not that long ago. I mean, it is actually long ago at this point. It's 10 years ago, but still, it's very prevalent that, like, Dave just wrote that, not too long ago, and that Sammy's like, oh, I've never seen him make such a big deal out of writing a line, and look at this line, look at this genius line I wrote, and then it's like actually a Roth line. If I ever did an interview with Sam, I literally would bring it up to him and get his reaction from it, because that would be priceless.
Oh, sure, but somebody must have told him that by now. I mean, come on, he's got to know.
I mean, somebody, right? But you never know. Let me tell you something. With these stars, one thing I've learned, whenever something so obvious like that, no one ever tells them, because they don't want to be the one delivering that news. That's the one thing I've learned that I've seen being around all these stars. Like, the most obvious shit, you got to remember, he doesn't live in the circle circles that you and I live in, he's not prevalent to stuff. Like, he probably never even heard a different kind of truth. I mean, he's just that type of guy. Who knows? Letter number 5 comes from Brandon Wall, who also nicknames himself Chocolate Slim. He comes in here with 3 letters. I have to condense this, Brandon, because you're out of control. So he wrote here, he put together an album that he wants us to talk about called Van Halen Going Undercover. And he says, wouldn't it be cool if the past and present members of Van Halen all made a covers album together with Diamond David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar the Red Rocker, and Mr. Gary Cherone? And he talked about the albums having Mississippi Queen featuring David Lee Roth and Sammy on vocals, Beer Drinker and Hellraisers with David Lee Roth on vocals, Addicted to Love, Sammy Hagar, We Can Work It Out, the Beatles song by Gary Cherone, Whole Lotta Rosie, the AC/DC song by David Lee Roth, Jumpin' Jack Flash, the Stones tune by Sammy Hagar, Day Tripper by the Beatles by Gary Cherone, LaGrange by David Lee Roth from ZZ Top, Young Man Blues, the Who song by Sammy Hagar, Stone Cold Crazy, the Queen song by Gary Cherone, In the Midnight Hour, Wilson Pickett song by David Lee Roth, Heartbreak Hotel, Elvis Presley cover for David Lee Roth, All Day and All the Night, Kinks cover by David Lee Roth, Superstition by Jeff Beck and Stevie Wonder, with David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar duetting on that, as well as Rock and Roll, where all 3 singers sing together. He thought that would be cool. He also said it would be cool if they did an original album of all unreleased music, okay, with these guys, which sounds like an interesting concept. He called it the Kitchen Sink album, which would be interesting. So he says here, We All Die Bold with David Lee Roth singing, I Want Some Action with Sammy Hagar singing, You Wear It Well, Gary Cherone, Peace of Mind, David Lee Roth, music of Top Down from 1984, The Wildlife, Sammy Hagar singing, Left for Dead, Gary Cherone, I Want to Be Your Lover, David Lee Roth, the music of Love song from 1984's Wildlife, Sammy Hagar singing, Say Uncle with Gary Cherone singing, Act Like It Hurts, David Lee Roth, Shakers, Sammy Hagar, Rock and Roll Cliche, Gary Cherone, Eyes of the Night, David Lee Roth, Out of the Ether, Sammy Hagar, Riverwide, Gary Cherone, and The Shape You're In, David Lee Roth, with bonus tracks of the Mississippi Queen and Rock and Roll. So this is interesting. And then he also wanted to ask if we will ever do an episode of Eddie Van Halen's score for the Fast Times at Ridgemont High unofficial sequel, The Wildlife. He wanted to know if we'll ever do. I want to tell you, Brandon, he's a long-time listener, so I want to thank you so much, Brandon, for listening. He's always a good contributor and DMs me a lot. I love your Van Halen covers album, that's for sure. All 3 singers, great idea. The only thing I would add is maybe I'm So Glad with Roth on it, the Cream cover, Wild Thing, the Trogs cover by Sammy Hagar, and maybe Bargain, the Who cover by Gary. In terms of the new album, I love that. I would add Eat Thy Neighbor by Roth, Between Us Two, Sammy Hagar, and That's Why I Love You from Gary. And regarding the Wildlife soundtrack, I'm working on an idea of a podcast that would include that in it. I don't know if we'll do a whole one just on that, but I have an idea for something I'm trying to work out that would include that in. So, but either way, it will be in the mix for sure. Dave, what do you say?
Those are some great album ideas, but they never would have happened. No way you're getting all the lead singers on an album. They would never agree to that. And quite frankly, Ed only likes working with one lead singer at a time.
That's true.
So that was never going to happen. The Wildlife soundtrack, it's so funny you mentioned that because I just heard some pieces of that like a week or 2 ago. I think I was listening to another podcast and they were referencing that. And the thing about the Wildlife soundtrack is that Ed had a lot of pieces of music in there that he would use on later Van Halen albums.
That's kind of my theme with it. I wanted to say like songs that branched off of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, including Right Now.
Good Enough?
Yeah, Good Enough too. Exactly. So yeah, that soundtrack is ripe for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like a demo. It's almost like a demo of Ed's work.
Yes.
Letter number 6 comes from a guy who does not want to be named. He wants his name withheld. He says here, I wanted to weigh in on your discussion of Chickenfoot 3. I agree with most of your comments on the album, all but one. In a matter of Come Closer, that song struck a major chord with me. My marriage has been strained, and after 26 years, we've had some rough patches. The lyrics of Come Closer couldn't have resonated with me more. Everything in there was just where I was at, and it's a song that makes me yearn for how it used to be, how it should be, and I'm trying. Look, Sammy can be found guilty of numerous lyrical crimes through his career, and I've been a fan since Standing Hampton. He's overused dumb cliches, overly juvenile sexual references, sappy schmaltz, and just plain lazy writing at times. I really don't think this is one of those times. This song is on point, and the band propels the song excellently, including another awesome Satch solo. But there is time for everything, and this one deserves to stay on the album. So I wanted to say to this unnamed young man, hey man, listen, no offense, I'm sorry if that got you upset, that's not our intent. Dave and I are really not big into the ballads. I just felt that it kind of stopped the album in its tracks a little bit, but if it means something to you and you feel like it's a good job, that's cool. I really don't have like a problem with the song. I just felt like, I don't know, it just slowed things down a lot. But if you like the song, that's all good, man. We're just not big ballad guys. What do you say, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if the song moves you and strikes a chord inside you, then hey, more power to you. Music is artistic and it's subjective. It's not absolute.
Right.
So if you like the song and it moves you, hey man, more power to you. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
It didn't do the same thing for us, and that's okay.
To me. I was waiting for you to do that.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. Well, I think it was your turn this time.
Okay. Letter number 7 comes from Steve R. So he's talked about the Grammy nominations, about, Wolf's Grammy nominations. He says, I did not do the calculations for the other categories, but he was saying, aside from the classical or jazz, I'm wondering if the average age is 20 years or more than the other categories. He did sort of an age breakdown, like, Paul McCartney, 79, Foo Fighters, 52, Wolf is 30, He said the average age is like 50.2. He said, I did not do the calculations for the other categories, but aside from classical or jazz, I'm wondering if this average age is 20 years more than other categories. But it might also be that the age also reflects the Dave and Dave podcast listenership, but wonder if it reflects the demographic of fans who saw Wolf on his solo tour this year, and if Dirty Honey might expose him to a younger audience. But also interesting to see no other new artists other than Wolf. And he says, thank you for all the hard and enjoyable work, Steve R. So yeah, Dave was actually just mentioning this in the Van Halen news segment about how young Wolf is and compared to everybody else in that category. I'm curious to see what happens here. I personally believe Paul McCartney or the Foo Fighters will take it. I'm wondering if the nod was to try to make up for what they did and the Grammys. I don't know. I think the song is fantastic, but it is curious the way the Grammys pick out different people for stuff. What do you think, Dave?
I think their nominations are usually pretty good. It's their winners that never seem to be right. But yeah, I really don't think Wolf's nomination is an attempt to make up for the crappy induction they did of his father. I think they genuinely feel it's a decent song.
Yeah, no, it is. And I'm not saying it's not worthy. It's totally 110% worthy. I just question the Grammys' motivations. They have strange decisions, like when Jethro Tull won for Best Metal Album.
No, I hear you. I hear you. But look, he got nominated.
Yeah.
So more power to the guy.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Let's see if he actually wins.
That'd be great. If he did, we will celebrate. Letter number 8 comes from Darren Leach, who he calls himself Daz from Oz. He says there aren't a whole lot of official biographies on Van Halen, and he wanted to know if we think Alex will ever write an autobiography. He also said maybe you could do a segment reviewing some of the books and give your opinion whether or not they are worthy reading or buying. And then he wanted to ask us what our favorite Christmas album is to play, because he's a big Elvis fan. Well, I don't think Alex will ever write a book. No way, no how. I really believe you need to read all the different books to really take pieces from each one to create sort of the full picture. That's sort of my theory. However, I think that Noel's book is really good for the kind of an on-the-road idea of what the band was like. Greg Reynolds' book, Van Halen Rising, really gives you a real well-researched background of their early days. And then if you want something after that, in terms of something maybe a deep dive on Ed is Eruption, Conversations with Eddie Van Halen book by Brad Tolinsky and Chris Gill. Now, the other two overview books of the whole band is Eruption and the Aftershock by Michael Christopher, and then Unchained, the Eddie Van Halen Story by Paul Brannigan. So there's that, and then there's Ian Christie's book, Everybody Wants Some, and then, of course, you got Dave's book, but Dave's book will take you into a head trip a little bit. Not that it's not entertaining, but in terms of staying factual and on point. And Sam's book, you know, it's got a strong spin to it, but it really kind of gives you a real strong depiction of the reunion from 2004. But I don't know. Oh, by the way, on my favorite Christmas album, I have two. My wife has two Christmas albums that she put out, so I do love her Christmas albums. Another Christmas, and It's a Very Merry Christmas Time by the band